You've cut off toxic people from your life. You've deleted social media apps, stopped attending networking events, and decided to work from home permanently. You've built your fortress, a safe space where no one can hurt you, where you're protected from drama, where you can focus on what matters. In that moment, you feel free, independent, powerful. But here's the devastating truth. Nobody tells you. Every wall you build, every connection you sever, every network you abandon is making you weaker. You're not protecting yourself. You're isolating yourself. And isolation is the fastest path to losing power, influence, and control. Today, we're going to explore the uncompromising principle of strategic connection, why isolation destroys power, and how to transform from someone who withdraws into someone who builds influence through engagement. The modern world has made isolation seem attractive. We're told to cut off toxic people, to protect our energy, to build boundaries. Remote work promises freedom from office politics. Social media detoxes promise peace from digital noise. We've been conditioned to believe that isolation equals strength, that withdrawal equals protection, that building walls equals security. But this is a trap. In a world where power is inherently social, where information is currency, where influence comes from connection, the person who isolates themselves is cutting themselves off from the very source of their power. They become vulnerable, uninformed, and ultimately powerless. Consider this scenario. Person A works remotely, avoids networking events, cuts off professional contacts, and builds a fortress of isolation. Person B maintains strategic connections, attends key events, stays informed through their network, and remains engaged with their industry. Who do you think has more opportunities? Who's more informed about threats and opportunities? Who wields more influence? The person who isolates themselves or the person who maintains strategic connection? Niccolo Machiavelli understood this dynamic when he warned against building fortresses. He wrote that isolation cuts a ruler off from valuable information and allies, making them more vulnerable to threats. In our modern context, this means every connection you sever, every network you abandon, every wall you build is cutting you off from the intelligence and alliances that grant real power. When you isolate yourself, you're teaching the world that you're not worth connecting with. When you maintain strategic engagement, you're teaching them that you're essential to the network. The first law of strategic connection is what I call information circulation, the uncompromising practice of staying connected to gather intelligence about threats, opportunities, and the shifting landscape of power. This isn't about being social or popular. It's strategic positioning. When you isolate yourself, you're cutting yourself off from the information that flows through networks. You don't know about opportunities before they're public. You don't hear about threats until they've already materialized. You don't understand the shifting dynamics of power because you're not in the flow of information. Think about the last time you cut someone off, avoided an event, or withdrew from a network. In that moment, you may have felt protected, but you also lost access to information. You became blind to opportunities. You became vulnerable to threats you couldn't see coming. But what if, instead of isolating yourself, you maintained strategic connections? What if you stayed engaged with key networks, gathered intelligence through your relationships, and remained informed about the shifting landscape of power? What if you became the person who knows what's happening before others do? Machiavelli captured this perfectly when he observed that rulers who isolate themselves lose their states due to their own inactivity and reliance on fortifications. In our modern context, this means the person who builds walls, who cuts off connections, who withdraws from networks, is creating their own vulnerability. They're not protecting themselves, they're making themselves an easy target. In the digital age, this principle becomes even more critical. Every connection you maintain is a source of information. Every network you engage with is a channel for intelligence. Every relationship you cultivate is a window into opportunities and threats. The person who isolates themselves is operating blind. They don't know about job opportunities before they're posted. They don't hear about industry shifts until they've already happened. They don't understand the dynamics of power because they're not in the flow of information. Meanwhile, the strategically connected individual remains powerful precisely because they're informed. They know about opportunities before others. They hear about threats before they materialize. They understand the shifting landscape because they're engaged with the networks that matter. This isn't about being everywhere or knowing everyone, it's strategic positioning. The second principle of strategic connection is alliance building, the deliberate practice of cultivating relationships that offer protection, support, and leverage. This requires understanding that in a world of threats and competition, the crowd offers better protection than walls. Most people isolate themselves because they believe independence equals strength. They think that needing others makes them weak, that relying on connections makes them vulnerable, that building alliances is a sign of insecurity. But this is backwards. True power comes from the ability to build strategic alliances, to cultivate relationships that offer leverage, and to create networks that protect and support your objectives. Consider two professionals facing a crisis. Professional A has isolated themselves, cut off connections, and built walls of protection. Professional B has maintained strategic alliances, cultivated key relationships, and built a network of support. Who do you think has more resources when crisis hits? Who can mobilize help faster? Who has more leverage to navigate challenges? The person who's isolated or the person who's strategically connected? Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." But he also understood that fear without connection is vulnerability. The person who isolates themselves may seem independent, but they're also alone when threats materialize. The person who builds strategic alliances has protection, support, and leverage precisely because they're connected. In professional settings, this means not cutting off industry contacts, not avoiding networking events, and not building walls that isolate you from your field. In social settings, this means maintaining strategic relationships, cultivating alliances that offer mutual benefit, and creating networks that protect your interests. The person who isolates themselves becomes the person everyone can target without consequence. The person who builds strategic alliances becomes the person everyone respects because they understand the power of connection. The third law of strategic connection is strategic presence, the practice of remaining visible and engaged in the networks and communities that matter to your objectives. This requires answering a simple question. Am I withdrawing to protect myself, or am I engaging strategically to build power? Most people isolate themselves because it feels safer. They believe that avoiding conflict, cutting off difficult people, and building walls will protect them. But emotional safety is not strategic value. In fact, it's often strategic cost. When you isolate yourself, you've protected yourself from immediate discomfort, but you've also cut yourself off from opportunities. When you withdraw from networks, you've avoided potential conflict, but you've also lost access to information and alliances. When you build walls, you've created a sense of security, but you've also made yourself conspicuous and vulnerable. The strategically intelligent individual understands that true power comes from strategic engagement, not isolation. They're willing to maintain connections, to stay visible in key networks, to remain engaged with their communities, even when it's uncomfortable in the short term, because they understand that long-term power comes from connection, not withdrawal. This isn't about being everywhere or pleasing everyone. It's about becoming intentional. It's about recognizing that isolation is often your greatest weakness, and that strategic connection is often your greatest strength. When you maintain strategic engagement, you gain access to information, alliances, and opportunities. You become informed about threats before they materialize. You become connected to networks that offer protection and leverage. In negotiations, this means maintaining relationships with key players, staying informed about industry dynamics, and remaining visible in professional networks. In leadership, this means staying engaged with your team, maintaining connections with stakeholders, and remaining present in the communities that matter. In your field, this means not isolating yourself from your industry, not cutting off professional contacts, and not building walls that make you invisible. The person who can maintain strategic connection, who can build alliances, who can remain engaged in key networks, this person commands respect and wields real power. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." The fool isolates themselves, cuts off connections, and builds walls that make them vulnerable. The wise person maintains strategic engagement, builds alliances, and creates networks that offer protection and leverage. When you isolate yourself, you reveal that you're afraid. When you maintain strategic connection, you project power. The ultimate goal of strategic connection isn't to be everywhere or know everyone. It's to build the networks and alliances that grant you real power. It's to reach a state where you're informed about opportunities and threats, where you have alliances that offer protection and leverage, where you remain visible in the communities that matter to your objectives. This doesn't mean becoming a social butterfly or losing your boundaries. It means developing what I call strategic engagement, the ability to maintain connections that serve your objectives while protecting your core interests. When you practice information circulation, you stay informed about threats and opportunities. When you build strategic alliances, you create networks that offer protection and leverage. When you maintain strategic presence, you remain visible in the communities that matter. The unmovable force understands that true power isn't the ability to isolate yourself. It's the ability to build strategic connections that grant you influence, information, and protection. It's the ability to remain engaged while others withdraw. It's the ability to build alliances while others build walls. In our hyper-connected, yet increasingly isolated world, this kind of strategic engagement is revolutionary. While others are cutting off connections, building walls, and withdrawing from networks, you operate from a place of strategic connection and informed engagement. The principles I've shared today aren't about being social or popular. They're about building power through strategic connection in a world designed to make you isolate yourself. They're about trading the temporary comfort of withdrawal for the lasting strength of engagement. In the digital age, where everyone is cutting off connections, building walls, and withdrawing from networks, the person who operates differently becomes magnetic. The person who maintains strategic connections, who builds alliances, who remains engaged in key networks, this person stands out like a beacon in a sea of isolation. The choice is yours. Continue isolating yourself, cutting off connections, and forever at the mercy of threats you can't see coming. Or develop the strategic intelligence to build connections, maintain alliances, and become truly powerful. As Machiavelli understood centuries ago, and as our isolated age has made more relevant than ever, true power lies not in building walls, but in building connections. The less you isolate, the more you know. The more you connect, the more power you gain. The more you engage, the more influence you command. The path to power through strategic connection is uncompromising because it requires you to resist every instinct our isolation-seeking culture has programmed into you. But for those disciplined enough to build alliances rather than walls, it offers something invaluable: access to information, protection through networks, and the kind of power that comes not from isolation, but from strategic engagement.